Now, so the first thing I will do is just let me go over here. I said I would share with you the results. So just let me share the screen. Do you remember that survey you did? Um, Again, there was only, well, 49, 50 responses. I would have expected a bit more, to be honest with you, given that there's what, 70 or 80 odd people in the class. Now, one or two people did say that they couldn't access or they couldn't attempt it a second time. Kind of baffling. I don't know why, because I kept it live and open now. Certainly, if you were in once, it won't allow you in the second time. And it was all anonymous anyway. So let me just kick open the share screen so as I can show you the results of the poll. So, so here we have the final results of the personality types. Just by way of interest, um, and where yeah, it's I'm having to scroll because of the way this is laid out. I can do it this way slightly better. Um, so now you see the whole up there. Um, so we can see that we have ESFJs and ESTJs are the dominant um, characteristics in the group. We have a few lone stars, as I would say, um, and interesting, interesting that, but funnily enough, that looks like a fairly normal distribution of the personality types. Looks fairly on the button across populations, as they say. And I say, yeah, there's anyway, moving swiftly on without too much banter on this. Here was your leadership styles. Interesting. Quite a majority of people fall into democratic style of management or leadership style, which is now. I would. Oh, sorry. Okay, hang on a second. Brendan has the hand up. Brendan, shout.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question just before we moved on from the MBTIs. Would you find that you're quite fixed, or if you took the test at different times, have you got different results? Just that the way you asked, like, what do you think I am? But I noticed with myself now because I've taken it for different reasons over the years, and sometimes you'd get different answers.
Very good question, Brendan. Very good, and you're spot on. Um, it generally there will be slight movements in your personality type over time. However, there are instances or events that can cause a severe personality effect. Certainly something that, for example, could change you from an extrovert to an introvert. And usually, the order of magnitude would be first bereavement of a close family member or a friend or partner, then relationship breakdown, and so on. These will have or a traumatic accidents, what they often refer to as traumatic events in one's life. Um, they can have a sizable effect on your personality. Um, and certainly over time, you will find that some of the results will, particularly if you're close to borderline in the on the 50-50 split, you could go over and back. And also you will find that which is even more interesting is the social environment that you're in. That will have, because at home we can be different people than we are inside and work, slightly. We might feel a bit more relaxed at home, for example, and a little bit tensed inside and work, and that can affect your personality. Um, and the whole goal of the exercise that I was bringing you through and the self awareness is that you get comfortable in both states. So generally speaking, okay, I might not curse and swear as much on camera as I would maybe when I'm on my own, and certainly when I'm out doing a bit of work. I don't find anything wrong with expletives anyway. Not me personally. Other people might take umbrage, but it's still part of the English language. We were having a debate there the other day, and when someone said, that's all bollocks, and if you look it up, it's going back to 17th, 18th century English, and it does have, it makes, it fundamentally means that somebody shirks responsibility or has made a mess of a job, you know. It's our bias and perceptions. And people say, "Oh, that's awful language. You can't be using that." It's perfect language, you know. It's and so on. So again, once you get into the comfort zones and with yourself and your self awareness and so on, and that you can level out your personality without having to have this is me inside mode. Remember this at the very start. I spoke about the image that we create about ourselves and what we like to project, and how I said that this takes considerable emotional energy, and oftentimes people will see through it. So that's they're at the extremes, and that's quite often that can be the case. So getting comfortable with yourself and in your own mindset, in other words, in your own shoes and so on, then you notice very little movements between these over time. But generally speaking, as I said, it's kind of from extreme traumatic instances, then the curve goes down. There's very little that'll impact you, you know. Is that helps you out, Brendan? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely, yeah, applicable. That's kind of things like that's what had me thinking about that question. Yeah.
No, it makes perfect sense. But and this is the point about reflective practice as well. You know that you're going back in and analyzing and looking at it, and then trying to look at the instances as to where you might have felt that personality type versus this, and why it might have shifted. You know, that's the whole. They're the fundamentals of good reflective practice, right across the board. And you know, as you've just demonstrated there on the just on the personality type question as a problem. So then we have where do we have then so again the majority of people falling into team manager, and I have one poor soul who is impoverished manager. Now, as I say, poor soul is as I said, you may be in that situation right now, but it's worth it for every manager to go through a phase of impoverishment, in terms of having shortage of resources, because that really gets the creative thinking and the critical thinking, problem solving processes flowing extremely effectively, you know. But as I said, you need energy to do that, and not just a mental energy, but physically you need to be getting, at the very basics, you need to be getting a good night's sleep. Well, that holds true for all of us really, but in those type of situations, and being able to decouple from all the challenges that you're fighting with, the you know the how do we say, the firefighting that's going on in the job during the day. You'll need to really take your time out to build up your mental energies, sleep, reflective practice, and certainly me time, plenty of exercise, because it requires stamina, you know, in those situations. And they're the tricks behind, you know, you might be in this firefighting mode for a while, but to be able to do that and stay on top of it, at least mentally and physically, you do need to be physically in order. Let's just put it that way. For the rest, then, you know, the country club manager. It would be interesting for you to see the country club manager, your personality type, and are you and what in particular your introversion or extroversion, and what is it about the relationships with people that uh, um, ties these two together? For example, what is it about your connection to people that you want to be liked by people, or so on and so on, that kind of stuff. That's why when we're doing the assignment, this is why these measurements are critical for you to understand. So because you'll have to use these. I mean, that's the fundamental requirement. Middle of the road manager and so on. Um, and then the last one was the followership style, and we have Interesting. High number of exemplary. Um, mhm. Again, matching that with your leadership style, that'll be interesting. And then your personality type. So you begin to see how these things become a little bit more complex. So can you move, and would you make a good leader, or a good follower, or can you be both? And then how does my personality type feed into what's and listen very carefully. What are the interventions based on my personality type would I need to improve or change um, to enable better followership or better leadership? Okay. You can't see me now because I'm sharing the screen, but I'm quite intense and I'm using a lot of hand gestures and so on because that's critical to a part of your assignment. Okay. Um, the upshot of this is when I edit the video, you'll get all of this, but me behind the camera and so. Point is, watch that. You have a lot of information about yourselves here already in this in those tests in those psychometric tests a lot, and now it's the advancement is how you move that and interconnect the different psychometric tests. Okay, there's no what we always have to be careful in terms of, don't let your mind think that, oh, this is one test and this is another test and I score this. The real critical thinking and reflection starts when you start to work, well, why is this? Why am I an introvert yet I am a task manager, for example? Is there a connection there, and so on and so on. That's where it becomes really powerful. And that, as I said, look at those in terms of what interventions or what routes or what actions you might want to take. So I'll be coming back to that later on when we're talking about the assignment. But keep copious notes about what I'm saying. Okay, I think that was the last. Oh yeah, sure. I could have stopped sharing the screen and I'll stop sharing it now. Stop sharing. There it is. There. Yes. So as I said, I was being quite animated here when I was talking about those results. It's important. And as I said, when I would have been doing these types of modules years ago, I don't have it here. Jeez, I had it on my hand not so long ago. Yes, yes. Can you all see that? As you can see, it's literally just, well, you can't see very clearly, but it's all about activities. There's a couple of hundred activities about self-development and managerial development, and we would have done, probably 50, 70 tests out of that just to assess ourselves and develop our leadership management plans. It was part of it was part of a program, but it was also part of my work in one company. And so it's it's a good book. If I don't know, there might be later editions of that or something similar, but it just has a whole raft of these tests. And I still do them partially for the fun of it, but also to see what consistency I have or don't have, depending on the situations. Because jokingly I say, that as you get older, you do get a little bit more cantankerous, and God knows I've become cantankerous. I blame it on the COVID, but in any case, we do change attitudes and so on, and we have to be much more switched on, should we say. Oftentimes, a lot of this is instinctive, and it doesn't change much over time, but it's always good to get, I should say, another opinion, just to keep yourself in check, as I would say. What else is there here now? Okay, that's Pedler and Bourgoyne. Now, down to the presentation part while. Now, I know you're looking at that screen and you're probably having a canary or something because the writing is so small. Don't worry about that because I've broken it down. And normally it was just this one diagram, and I chose it because it's quite comprehensive and it has, I think, 180 or closer to 200 um, identifiable biases. Now, um, I how to say, introduce it and kill it at the very start before anyone mentions unconscious bias. And the simple way of trying to define that and what it means, it would be like if you're meeting someone and you believe them to be a good person because they're very similar to you, or you're very much alike to that person. Nevertheless, um, and that's how they kind of put the nuts and bolts around this unconscious bias, because you hear a lot of banter about it. Um, Beliefs are fundamental to our own biases. We create and we select our biases. So for biases and beliefs to be anyway recognizable, that there has to be some level of action or brought forward to the foremind. So therefore, it doesn't become so much an unconscious. So if you actually begin to reflect in action, you'll wonder, well, what is it about this person? Straight away, that's not there's something about this person that gels with me, or whatever. We hit it off together. Why? What is? But when you start to reflect on that, you begin to identify critically what it is. So that kind of dispels this unconsciousness. As for I mean, also this idea of unconscious learning has been pretty much dispelled as well. I'm not a psychologist, nor am I a psychiatrist for that matter, but pretty much the most of the commentary and some of the research, I was looking at this because I was curious myself. I was coming at it from a negative perspective, but I wanted to unshaft my biases and say, like, go into this with an open mind. What are they trying to describe, and then making sense of it. And that's how I make sense of it, insofar as that it has to be some way actionable. Our beliefs, our values, and so on are rooted when we go back into if we reflect back in it, and through that system alone, through that simple act of reflection, um, that gave me how to say, the understanding, the sense of what these concepts were. And then, and on top of that, I said, okay, this actually just shows that reflection actually does work when you look back on it. And why? And because we start to answer more and more questions. And even when I was looking at the unconscious bias, I was even bringing in some of my own personality types to say, could this explain that? Could that explain that? So it started to get quite heavy and deep. And then I started to backtrack on how I was doing this and said, am I on the right track with this? Is it personality, or is it conditional, or is it personality in one instance and in another instance? Or in other words, then I started to look at the context in which these personalities and these should say, similarities might have originated, and that's why I felt would feel a little bit more comfortable in this person's um, presence as opposed to someone else, and so on. And even to the point that where I was reflecting on this as well and say, well, why have I a dislike for such and such? It's not usual to have an instant dislike. And once I'm being extreme here now, but there's something not right in the interaction. And even looking back of instances where I would have been bullied and harassed in the workplace and so on, and then to look at and what I did in the instance, how I reacted, some of the techniques I managed to that worked for me, and then how would I avoid that happening again in the future. So, and even to this day, I still find that the person in the instance where I would have been bullied, I still had some empathy and for that person in subsequent events, which which I then had to try and explain to myself, why was this and why was that? Because when I strip away the different contexts in their behavior and then to put them into different other contexts, fundamentally we're just all human and so on and so forth. And a lot of this stuff can be exaggerated or amplified in the situation or in the context. And if we take out context out of it, we can actually get a different picture, which kind of goes against what I've been saying earlier on, saying when you reflect, it has to be contextual. But when you start to look at other ways and reflection, on reflection, and so on, remember this triple loop learning, we're getting into deep water, should we say there. Anyway, without going too far into this, here we have this diagram. Where's my mouse thingy? Oh, mouse isn't. Oh, here it is. Yep. So that has all these. Now, I'm not going to spend much time in it, but again, these are things that we noticed that things already primed memory are repeated or often, so we get too much information. I would be very much personally, that drives me crazy, getting too much information, and I know that I can get frustrated if I'm getting a lot of repetition or people are throwing too much information, because my mindset wants to get straight to the core of the issue. And I remember I talked the other night about noise, or during this week, about noise interfering and so on, saying, and getting to. Now, this is also critical inside when you're dealing with peers or subordinates, team members reporting into you, or if you're indeed dealing with when you're dealing with a manager or presenting a solution or problem, you have to be economic with words and precise. That's the point, really, because it can, and if you're not reading the other person's signal, for example, hypothetically, you're explaining something to me and you're going off on all these tangents. If you weren't picking up on the signals that there's some levels of frustrations. But generally speaking, out of courtesy, I won't be so emphatic. I won't be doing that sort of stuff. Most people wouldn't, Well, you get the odd one, but you should be able to pick up on the more nuanced non-verbal communications and try to get to the core of stuff. And oftentimes that's why when we, in some assignments, I haven't been specific here with you, but in some assignments we'd say that you have a word count, and the word count, as people are going through it, they're saying, oh God, where am I going to cut back here? It's the whole point of it, is to be more precise and direct. Don't fluff it up with words, and it helps you to unscramble your mind and get right to the core. So when we notice something has changed, and then we're drawing the details to confirm our existing beliefs. So again, being careful of this one. And now these are just the too much information types, so we end up suffering these or exhibiting or experiencing these particular biases. Now, I'm not going to go into every one of them. However, there is a document that I've uploaded where you can link, and it does have explanations of each and every one of these biases. To use the expression, knock yourselves out. Do it unconsciously if you have to. But there's a lot of stuff there. But some of it is fascinating, and you would begin to recognize, and there. You would begin to see some of these biases surfacing. We notice flaws in others more easily than we notice flaws in ourselves. And again, even if you go back to the very basic or the very early days when we were talking about the mirror effect and the 3M, and I. Mentor mirror and mission mentor mirror, when we're back at in those early days on this module, and I was saying that we have to drop our guard. We have to be able to wear our heart on our sleeve to a large extent and be open, honest, and that will mitigate a lot of these things, because looking for flaws or noticing flaws, remember there is always going to be a kind of mirrored effect going on there. Just be careful on these. And we notice things already primed in our memory are often repeated. So I've just extracted some of these bizarre, funny, visual, striking, anthropomorphic things stick out in our mind, and non-bizarre and non-funny things and so on. So these are the different the humor effect, picture superiority effect. worth having a look at it. Self-relevance is what does it mean to me, or does it mean anything? And we can have a bias of, so be careful of these negativity bias. We'll look at a few of them that are pertinent to leadership now shortly, and then we notice something has changed. And now I won't go through all of these. It's more of an exercise for yourself. It's done the same way now. This is what I did want to get down to. So four of these cognitive biases that affect leadership. Now, I'm reasonably sure, and having spoken with Dave, that you would have covered a number of elements or areas in these, and this is why it's important that we underpin this integrative stuff with the different modules. Before I go on, I should say that, for example, the followership results. Now I'll forward those on to Peter Meehan, who you'll have next semester, and you'll have Peter for stakeholder involvement and so on. And one of the core areas that he'll be looking at again will be followership in organizations, what it means in the context, and so on. So those generic results, as I said, this is a picture of what the cohort of students looks like from this year, and he'll be able to work with that then, looking at the different styles and see what's important, and not so much what's important, but how we can move around in different styles and so on. So that's next semester based on the followership type. But coming back to these biases, Dave might have mentioned it. So affinity bias relate to the predisposition that we all favor to people who remind us of ourselves. And I mentioned this earlier on, that's sometimes they would have referred to this as an unconscious bias, but it's not, because in the process of looking for similarities, we are conscious, we're already looking for, and we're picking up all this information non-verbally. Is it their voice, their gesture, their look in their eye contact, and so on, even if it's the way they dress and so on, these kind of things. Or they might be relating experiences. I was in this place, and say, oh geez, yeah, I was there as well, kind of thing, and that begins to create a connection. But we can oftentimes fall into that bias, but we need to be able to be aware of this, particularly if it was in around an interview process or promotional process, that we, in other words, we're not, I'd say, blinded by the affinity, that we're actually looking at the pure data or the facts before that person is promoted or hired as such. And even, another commonplace one might be, do you know so and so? Excuse me. And by virtue of your social circles, you might have an affinity. So when applied to a regular workplace process such as hiring and promoting, and at its best, this bias seems successful people will be given somewhat of a chance because of their similarities. We've all heard of and read the phrase, you remind me of myself at that age, and so on, so on. So hiring practices that can help this problem include blind screening, where the candidate's application is stripped of personality, identity, and so on. Now, that's pretty much the case nowadays anyway. Other than your name, most of the other personal details will be stripped from a CV as such. And also, as I jokingly mentioned, when doing one of this Irish Research Council funding applications with my PhD student a couple of weeks ago, we were told to be gender blind in our responses. So he, she, and himself, herself, and so on. And as I joked about it at the time, I said they missed the other one, he, she, and it. But anyway, all that stuff has to go on. Promotions, pay rises, and intangible opportunities to train or network are harder to find workarounds. And that being the point. So your awareness of your affinity biases, particularly in these areas here, are important to understand, as I said, so you can strip away the bias and look at the data, the pure facts that will enable that person to either justify a promotion and so on. Now, of course, all the other things come with that, if they don't get the promotion, what if, and so on, so on. But again, it's how you develop yourselves to not, you have to be very careful in leadership and management roles that the connections you're making with people that there's, do you know this expression, familiarity breeds contempt, for example. I'm trying to explain that in a way that you have to have a solid connection and understand your people, but they must also know that your decision is based on facts, not on pure personalities, or because I know this person for 20 years or we work in the same circles. And you have to be able to manage yourself that you can let them down without disrupting the previous state of the relationship. And that's what becomes challenging, but that's unfortunately or fortunately that's what distinguishes solid leaders from pure managers or not so solid leaders, in my book. So to combat confirmation bias, so confirmation bias is our human tendency to seek out or notice information that supports our existing beliefs. And that's a pretty common one. So it can be a problem for leaders who need to be open to feedback, so solutions and ways of doing things, and may not have favored in the past, and so on. So again, your confirmation bias, you use your reflection in action or on action. In either case, take the time, slow down, such that you don't get jumped into and brought into this confirmation bias. I think sometimes they might refer to this as the group think, and it's kind of mentioned later on there that we get kind of caught up in the moment with everyone else, and we start to move with the flow. On the dark side of it, that's essentially what happens inside in mob behavior, for example, which can lead to riots and so on. And when psychiatrists or psychologists analyze behaviors of groups of people, it's often coming down to the fundamentals of personal space and this invisible shield around us. And when that becomes a little bit more threatened, people's anxieties and stress levels start to rise, and that's the perfect boiling pot for fights to break out and ultimately riots when you have large crowds and so on. So to combat confirmation bias, when you're about to make a decision, look for ways to challenge what you think you see. Seek out information and so on, so on. Share the feedback and get so in a practical sense. I know we were talking about reflection practice, and I've mentioned so many things. Look at things from different perspectives, hence reflective practice. This is pure reflection in action. So you're right in the moment, so challenge it. And sometimes you might get the remark, so-and-so he's so negative, this, that, and the other thing. That's not the point. That person is switched on. They're looking and they're finding possible pitfalls because everyone else is going on the track, on this particular track. This person is able to, and again, you'll see that in your team dimensions, or in your personality style, or in your, what do you call it? In your followership style, and see what kind of are you. But you can do it without drawing that negative perception to yourselves. So have we looked at this? Let's rethink this for a second, and so on. It's the way you communicate and get people to slow down, to reevaluate the possible solution or suite of solutions, just to almost like double checking. But don't get caught up into euphoria, and this is how we counteract the confirmation bias. And it could be a simple thing as, okay, we've come up with this. Let's go away and have a quick think about that. So everyone has a share. So even a simple notion like that can actually get people to go off in their little groups. and have a further chat. So you're almost instigating reflective moments with people. And sometimes they'll come back and say, we're just having a chat about this at the outside or on the break and so on, and we found that this is there might be another thing we can consider. So that goes on. So as a leader, creating those environments and creating those instances can be extremely powerful, and that's how you'll ultimately start to build the trust and reputation as being a good leader. Let's move on here. Conservatism bias, similar to affinity bias, conservatism bias sees us favor familiarity. In this case, it's favoring existing information over new information that threatens to change our preconceptions. So when when we do get new information, we tend to weight it less heavily or dismiss it. So in other words, this is often, and this is, you can see in here, there's a link, you can go off and have a look a bit more on change management. And I know Dave would have covered this with you in detail as well, but it's important, because, and I think one of the telling statements of our own new president, Professor Conan, when he introduced himself to the staff, one of the sentences he came out with was that if you come into my office and say, well, this is the way we've always done it around here, he said, you'll be going back out fast enough. He said, and the language will follow you, because he doesn't like that. He doesn't want that. So he was setting the grounds, but interestingly, the majority of people, and I quickly scanned around the room, and I could see a certain relief on people's faces there, because fundamentally, people don't like doing the same old stuff in, day out, generally speaking. We need to have some kind of variety or change or uplift. And this guy has given us license to do things differently in many respects, and unshackle ourselves from the old regimes. And we say, well, maybe now we can start moving at pace. Maybe now we can start doing things that we feel are more meaningful. Now, again, it was interesting because it was that single topic conversation by him really would have killed the conservatism bias in that. Now it exists, and a lot of people would be comfortable with that, and oftentimes, the public service in general would be accused of conservatism, because don't like change, and often it's an age thing. The older you get and further the more you move in your career, you tend to settle down, say, we'll just go with the flow, and keep doing what we've already been doing. We've only a few years to retirement and so on. So again, once you're aware of it, you can do something about it. Now, I'm going through these, just light touch on these for a particular reason, and I'll come to it later on. A fundamental attribution error refers to our tendency to believe that what people do reflects who they are. And the bias sees us overemphasizing personal characteristics and ignoring situational factors when judging others' behaviors. So a habitually late employer could be lazy and unmotivated, or they could be have a caring responsibility. In the latter case, the ability to start later in the day or work from home when needed could see the productivity soar. So if you're inclined to blame your staff for something you perceive as a character flaw, take a step back. We would have had this. Oh God, I'm going back 22 years ago in a company I worked with, and we were constantly getting guys coming in late in the morning and so on and so forth. And the simple reason was freaking traffic. Coming out to Shannon, Jesus, in the mornings, coming in either direction, whether you're coming from Limerick or from Ennis, the bloody traffic was a nightmare at the time. And so a simple solution was changing the working hours. And even to the point that I said to guys, look, okay, 10 o'clock-ish start, if that suits you, 3 o'clock finish, or whatever suits you, 4 o'clock finish. Only one condition, guys: if we can hit our targets and get the job done. They're unbelievable performance. And I got stick from my colleagues. I said, you can't be doing this, you can't be doing that, we need to have him here, this, that, and the other thing. I said, excuse the expression, I said, bollocks. I want to give the guys the flexibility. For crying out loud, they're coming in stressed as it is, because they're having to race through traffic or this, that, and the other, and dropping kids off to school. Just be a bit more flexible, I said, sure, look, we did this in Ericsson. I had to rely on that. We had 7 to 10 were the flex hours, and 3 to 5 in the afternoon. So as long as you put in your core hours and all that sort of stuff. So I said, we'll trial it, and it works. What we found was, the guys were coming in slightly later in the morning. They were avoiding all the traffic. They were able to drop their kids off, and they were coming in a little bit more relaxed. But more importantly, we found that they were staying on later in the evenings. The majority weren't taking off early and how to say, taking the piss out of the system. They were actually conscious that they felt obliged to put in their hours, but more importantly, they were hitting their targets. And in actual fact, we were able to improve our productivity. I think at the time it was something like 7.5 or 7.7% within the space of 3 months, simply by that change of rule. So fundamental attribution error was out the window. Just change the conditions and look at what's happening. And I know they use the example here of the caring approach, but as a manager, leader, these are the things you need to observe and watch. So don't be falling into trap. Marcus is always in here at 9:30. Back in the early day with Ericsson, when we changed that criteria for a 10 o'clock start with our staff, we found that mostly the older staff with family were coming in on before 9 o'clock. And it was the young single people that were coming in towards 10 o'clock. And when HR analysed it, they were partying. And so and some of them had the unfortunate reputation of being a shower of drunken yuppies. But that's just the way it was. But it was interesting to see those kind of, experiments unfold. So why emotional intelligence is the most valuable asset? Of course, in the 90s and this to back, we go all the ways back to IQ and this, that, the other thing. And investigating further, they discovered that the different forms of intelligence, emotional intelligence, the original researcher John Mayer defined it as the emotional intelligence is the ability to accurately perceive your own and others' emotions, to understand the signals that emotions send about relationships, and to manage your own and others' emotions. So that's where it all crooks down. So IQ is no good without EQ, and sometimes EQ will supersede IQ. Oftentimes it does, actually. So why is emotion? So again, we talked about these. Why did in the first couple of lectures, and why do these psychometric tests? And the underlying principle is to get an understanding of your own self-awareness. Not for me to get an answer, for you yourselves. So this is the ability to recognize your own strengths and weaknesses and understand how they impact others, essentially. So understanding your own flaws allows you to pursue constant self-improvement, as well as making it easier to allow for others' flaws in others. So conflict resolution becomes less fraught when the individuals approach the interaction with a sincere respect for the other point of view. The 6 and the 9, empathy, emotional intelligence. Now, again, take note of these. Just highlight these. Just keep these in tick box if you have them written down, and so on, because they're going to become integral to a slight little modification on the assignment, and we'll talk about that shortly. What's this? Self-regulation. So people with high EQ have insight into their own emotional state and can self-regulate their feelings. That prevents them from becoming overwhelmed by negative emotions and making decisions based on fear or panic. So self-regulation, and that's it's just a deeper version of your self-awareness. So you have a thorough understanding, a deep understanding of the self, and the slowing down effect, for all intents and purposes, and not jumping and getting pulled in by all these other biases and actions and groupthink and so on, that you work and you kind of influence the pace at how things are going, such that you're a little bit more comfortable. So people who are practicing the skill make it a point to step outside their first reaction or to a situation and consider multiple explanations for someone else's behavior. Offer yourselves alternatives if plan A doesn't work, and so on. And this reduces the temptation to take things personally, and helps to calm the emotions and gets you away from the black and white of thinking. And that's that, and that's the important point there. Being stepping outside of the situation and multiple explanations. My words, different perspectives. Always look, and as I say, plan A, plan B, and plan D. Have the alternatives available to you, because they will all have their merits when you stand back and evaluate them even further. So watch this, in terms of self-regulation. So basically, putting a little bit of pace, getting the right pace. Again, critical to good leadership. and because it draws on your emotional intelligence substantially to be able to pick up all the different nuances, the different non-verbal communications and so on with the team. And the bigger the team, the more complex that becomes, because remember, individuals, you're dealing with individuals in a team context. They will all have their own personalities, dynamics and so on. And as a leader, how efficiently you're picking up on all of those interactions and getting the pace, setting the bar for the aggregate of the group as such. And sometimes you might have to slow it way down because to bring some of the team members, keep them on board, and watching for those signals, and watching for reactions and so on. That's absolutely critical as a leader. And in many respects, that's what disadvantages me with the non-physical presence inside a lecture. Now I'm constantly scanning around on the screen down here with me, just to look for reactions and so on. And the majority of cameras are turned off. They're probably gone out for a walk. I don't know. Whatever. But in any case, it's a little bit of a disadvantage. So it's something I'm going to have to work on for, how am I going to improve this engagement or change it or do something about. And of course, all suggestions are welcome. If you think of any ways of doing this. So motivation, high emotional intelligence enables you to motivate yourself and motivate others to do the best they can. So the deeper understanding that comes with the higher EQ allows you to get to the heart of what inspires your team. Kind of the point I was just after making a few sentences ago, and allows you to create trust and companionship within the group. So this in turn inspires intrinsic motivation in your staff. So use the emotional diversity within your team to build stronger sense of unity, and you should see motivation soar, or at least improve. And that was the point when I was saying looking for the aggregate and then being aware of all the different interactions, the multiplicity of and complexities of the one-on-ones, you to many, but being able to assimilate all of those as over time. It's not going to happen in one meeting, but over time you start to build these relations. And the intrinsic motivation, what makes the people feel good about themselves in doing what they're doing. We all know the usual extrinsic motivators, the pay rise, the car, the holiday, this, that, the other bullshit stuff. But it's the soft stuff we need to get to grips with, and these are the intrinsic. What makes you get up in the morning? What drives you? The mortgage says you, and preschool payments. I don't. But more importantly, they might genuinely be the reasons, but then our ability to turn them into positives, and to get onto the positive side of our motivation. Otherwise, you just end up, not in the best mental health. And then social skills. So good social skills are the ones that most valuable assets any person can have. And if you're in any sort of management position, they're even more crucial. So studies show that in communication, only 7% of the words we speak, while the remaining 93% are made up of tone of voice, body language, and other non-verbal cues. Now, that's kind of a new one to me, to be honest with you, because I would have, put it down at almost down at the Pareto principle, 80-20 kind of thing. And some places they say maybe a bit less. I wouldn't agree with the less, but it would be interesting to see these evaluations done now, particularly in the light of this remote working and online stuff as well. That will be. I'm quite sure you already have people, academics, and God knows who else, consultancies, management consultancies, and all that sort of, already trying to evaluate and get more data around this and writing papers. And if you think back a couple of weeks ago, where there might have been some suggestions about, I know there were some topics in radio programs about monitoring people's work at home, and how long they're logged in and all this sort of stuff. Um, my own opinion on that, totally the wrong way to go, because straight away you're impacting the trust element of the relationship, and then some management would say that, oh, we have to have people in, we know they function. You don't know that they function in the work environment. That's not the point. But there are these superfluous or very lightweight arguments to try and justify, we say, everyone having to be back in the office. I don't agree with them. Again, these are my own opinions. I value a job being done, and being done on time, if not sooner. And if we start, well, my opinion again, if we start looking at it in those contexts, then people might say, well, bang, yeah, I'll work harder and get the job done. Then I can go for a walk. I can just turn off my computer and do this, that, the other thing, and so on. And what kind of, I suppose one of the influencers there was my own daughter, and the type of work she does. And she has to hit targets on a quarterly and annual basis. And she could hit a quarterly target in 6 weeks. Or at least I've seen that happening. And she uses the time to travel. And the only time I know wherever she is from her Instagram page. If she isn't in the arse end of America, South America somewhere, I think she's up in Belfast now, I think, and it's just from tracking her photographs. She likes taking these murals and all that sort of stuff, and street art and things like that. That's one of her hobbies. But that's how I know. But she's been doing that for years, and she hits her targets and gets her time off. But she's not alone, and there's probably a number of you in the class would have the same type of situation or work environment as such. I'm going off a little bit on tangent, but it kind of augments what I'm saying, is that we might be looking at the wrong metrics to try and reintroduce people back into the workplace and all that sort of stuff. And as I said, if you're going to put monitoring software on, or how long a person's there, or this, that, and the other thing, or even if you're doing it covertly, which is even worse again, and use that as a beating stick down the road. Well, you only spent 20 hours working on given 20 hours company time while you were online, and the rest of the time you weren't, blah blah blah. There are going to be some dangerous times. They would be the pure managers in my case, in my definitions. Ticking boxes and doing this, that, and the other thing. They're useless. I'll be absolutely bold and say that, as that kind of a person. If you find yourself working for that kind of person, get the hell out of it. Try and change, move on, or whatever. Because you'll never have a trust. Oh, the process told us we have to do this, and we're following the process for this. Fine, leaders follow processes as well, but they don't do it that way. They're flexible, and again, if you're unfortunate enough to be in a position to write or influence processes, be very careful on these things. My mantra on this is involve the people who are going to be using the processes to get feedback, understanding, and buy-in. Don't just say, we're introducing the software now that's going to control, to tell us how long you're on. As of Monday morning, you start signing this. Resignations have increased dramatically in the last quarter. And these are American statistics. They're up substantially. Morgan, no, it wasn't Morgan. Stanley, it was McKinsey's report during the week. Something like, was it 8 million resignations and mostly between the 30 to 45-year-old age group, in around that age. And the older age group, they're saying from 50 to 70, kind of 55, 75, not as many resignations. And it had remained reasonably constant to before, pre-COVID and post-COVID. The main reason people have it now, the reasons to put down to. First one was remote working. People have left companies in for other companies that support remote working. And the other one is some influence of a pent up movement between companies because of COVID, because of restrictions and so on. So people say, well, what's the point? There's no point in resigning. I can't go anywhere and I'll stick it out now. But they see that as a smallish impact. But the headliner is remote working and opportunities to do so in other companies. So watch that space if you're in that leadership management role inside an organization. So it's let's just say there's a paradigm shift, a new way, and we need to look at and don't fall back to the conservatism bias. Oh, this is the way we've always done it around here, so you're going to have to come back into work and so on. It's a new working environment, and it's going to continue, and it's going to change even more dramatically over time. Watch that space. As I said, you have all these new initiatives coming up. 5G technology. We were looking at and have been looking at for a number of years now, what's known as Industry 4.0, sensorized work and so on, and the 5G networks that will transfer all this data and so on, which means that technically we'll have a lot more bandwidth. Well, we do have a lot more bandwidth, but we can do an awful lot more online and augmented and so on, so on. So, work environment is changing, So social skills also impact teamwork culture, mutual cooperation, workplace happiness, all of which have a positive effect and so on. So self-awareness and regulation help us to control our own body language, so we can so that our projected message is consistent with our words. Critical statement. And empathy helps us to receive the same information from the interlocutor. So this idea of our own body. Now, I'll mention it, but I'm not going to go into it in depth. You can become quite expert in this area through neuro-linguistic programming. But that's really advanced stuff, and at its basics, we're practicing some of it now anyway, by, I won't say controlling our emotions, but being aware and knowing our emotions and knowing how they impact others. And even if you think of, if for example, at its very basic, if a kid misbehaves, what do? You might frown at the poor innocent. That conveys a non-verbal communication and so on. And then all the ways up to, as I mentioned to you before, the late night poker and the tells and so on. These guys are serious NLP experts. They've built up the skills. They might not have taken any formal courses, but a lot of the intelligence agencies have advanced courses on this, and some business practices teach NLP at more advanced level. But as I said, be careful. Don't just, if you do it, you have to be all in, and by that I mean spend a lot of time studying, rehearsing, practicing, because you meet another counterpart of NLP, and it can be fireworks. Hence why I always refer to the late night poker games. You watch these guys. Okay, there's not fireworks, but someone goes away with the big pot, and wins the game. But they're watching the tells, the information, the non-verbal, and how can they influence people. And it's not just done in one hand. It's done over the course of several hands. And can I see if somebody is bluffing or not, and so on. So you build up the profile of your opponents or game players as such. So, but we can do this without being that kind of dark about it. We don't have to be that advanced to create a positive environment. And the last one then, so and it's just a throwaway page. All this information is up on Moodle. So as I said to you, I'm just moving out. And I'm back. It's 12:10. Can we take a 10-minute break and then come back onto the assignment stuff? I need a coffee. I've been talking constantly. Okay, folks. Since I see Thomas, I'll just have a quick look at chats and see is there anything coming through here, and I'll see what time is now. Say 12:20. Right, so folks, first thing first. I was interacting with the external examiner, and she wanted some additional work done, and as a consequence, I see where she was coming from, and I looked at the assignment and I modified it slightly. Okay, there's a kind of a third element to be done, not overwhelming, but nevertheless, it's a third element. So on first things first, on your Moodle page in the assessments, you'll see the third assessment. It just got updated on it. Now I'm going to share the screen with you and walk you down through the assessment. Okay. This is your final assignment, and this is what's after this third element. So let me put on my glasses. Okay, you have three elements to this. You have the reflective report part, the self-assessment document, and then you have this add-in from the feedback from the external examiner. And when I thought about it, it made more sense from your perspective and from the module itself. And so, taking each one of these, in the reflective report, if you identify three, just take three instances in your professional careers, three events that, let's just say, that stand out as most impactful on you. They can be positive or negative. In a situation, could be winning a big project, could be setting up a team, it could be some particular challenge or problem that you had and solved. And if you can, in picking those three events, that you would have maybe 2 or 3 occurrences of similar type events in your career. So maybe 10 years ago this is what happened, and 3 years ago this same type of situation happened. And then analyze yourself in both situations from a reflective practice perspective. In other words, when you encounter the second event, the second recurrence of the event, and you reflect on that and say, well, what I had done originally yielded a particular result. When I reflected the second time onto that first event, I tried to change it differently and I got a different outcome. Now I'm reflecting on the two events, and I can see that the way I did the second one was not as I got the result, but it wasn't as effective, or it was more effective than the first time I got the result. And now you're reflecting on both situations. So how would I do it differently? What would I change again? And that becomes the bucket, the metadata. So if in time I encounter this same type of situation or event, and based on my previous two, this is how I would handle it or process the result, or expect to process the result, or carry out the process in the future if this happens. They're the events, and then relate to the emotions. So they're talking about, that's how I felt in the first time, this is how I felt the second time, and I might have been a little bit more confident, I might have been a bit more cautious, or I didn't feel good about it, but I got the result, and it was a riskier effort. And in the third way, how do I mitigate that negative feeling? I had a positive feeling the first time, I had a little bit of more riskier and bringing on a negative sense of emotion the second time. The third time, I know more about the two events and how I felt in it. So therefore, in the third possible event, or third possible recurrence of the event, contextualized event, in the future, this is how I can control my emotions to get a better result, or a more effective result, or more effective way of getting the result. Do you, are you on the same page as me?
Not really.
No, not really either.
Not really.
Can you maybe
So-
No, no.
say it again?
Okay, I'll take it again. You have to. I'm asking you to pick 3 instances in your careers. Now let's just take one of those instances. The instance, we call it instance A. Instance A happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago in a particular context. Maybe let's try and pin it down to an appraisal meeting, right? You were giving the appraisal to your staff, and you got a result, you gave them their appraisal, but there was something that wasn't feeling right about you, and it was maybe the first time you were given an appraisal. And as a consequence, you put in a lot of effort, and where you're looking for the right information, you analyze the event itself, and you went through the process of giving it, but you weren't feeling right about it. Okay, but you got the result. You give the staff so that in that instance A, then you repeat that again maybe 6 months or a year later, and you're given the appraisal. And the second time you're given the appraisal, you thought about the first time and said, yeah, I could have prepared better the first time. I should have done this, and I could have interacted better with the employee. And you tried it out in the second appraisal system or occurrence of the event A. So event A part 1, and then event A part 2, and you go to now you're coming up to an appraisal in 6 months' time or 3 months' time, and you'll think back of in instance A, the first time I did the appraisal, the second time I did the appraisal, I'm reflecting on both of those. Now the third time I'm going to give this in 3 months' time to the employee. What have I learned in the previous 2 iterations of it that will make it more effective for me and the employee? Okay, how can I improve on the way I did what I did previously? So we're looking at 2 previous events as opposed to just 1. Now I'll be flexible that you could take just 1, but you'll get more value if you take 2 occurrences of the same type of event, and then you're trying to project, this is how I go about it in future, and build in how you felt in the first cycle of the event, how you felt in the second cycle of the event, and how you will feel. What will give you that, I should say, the positivity when you go to do it the third time? Because and it's a good example because it is so critical to people, the feedback of how they're performing on their jobs. And and Jack Welch, for example, talks about it's the most important role of a manager or leader manager, he refers to, is feedback and feedback. There's no point and unfortunately a lot of people just go by the process and say, oh geez, I have to do this, that, and the other thing. Even if you felt in that situation, why did you feel, oh, I have to go through the motions, I hate this part of the job, or this, that, and the other thing? Understand why. And that's why we need to reflect, because this is critical to the person receiving the appraisal. And we talk about biases there. I remember I did that myself when I was on the receiving. It's the same thing. You were on the receiving end, most likely. And therefore, what it meant to you, putting yourself, and it's a good example of where you would have been on the receiving end of it, and now you're on the giving end of it. And in that context, it's extremely important oh God, I'm sharing the screen, you're not seeing my facial expressions. Doesn't matter. In that context, it's important that you understand the different perspectives, you and then the employee. So if you take that's an example of our reflective practice, and it ticks all the boxes of how, and as I said, be quite open about your feelings and your emotions in these instances. First and foremost, all your material is confidential. Okay. And I can absolutely tell you some of the stuff that I've read over the years would put the frighteners on you. Anything from exposures to abuse, suicides, and so on. I've read it all, and it's some of the stuff was quite harrowing, but again, that's not the issue. It's what the student had taken from the experiences and how they developed or used or benefited from the experience, not the instance of I mean, how do you benefit from an harassment case or a suicide? You don't benefit from that, but it's the way you handle it and how your emotions and recognizing it and the awareness and so on. Because in their instances, these events could reoccur and did reoccur, and they needed to have a certain level of strength and a very, very strong level of empathy and more so emotional intelligence to be able to be re-exposed to such recurring events. That doesn't mean we become desensitized, as often you'd hear the blurb going out. Far from it. So that's the. Does that help? Sorry, there's a raised hand. Let me take these now because I know these are critical and there's chats open here. Let me open up. How many words? Oh God, let me check here. I'm saying here at the bottom that the total word count should be 2,500 to 3,000 words, right? Okay, I'll just do this basic question first. The second part, just bear with me for a moment and I'll come back to the rest of mine just to clarify this basic. The second part of your assessment, I don't know if you have it open here, but anyway, it says complete the self-assessment document. That's only a one-pager. It's in PDF and it's available in topic 9 on the Moodle page. It's only a one-pager and there's a scoring mechanism. All I want you to do on that one is do the self-assessment. Read it. There's a dozen or so questions on it, 10 questions maybe thereabouts, and scan it or photograph it and put it into your final report. It won't count as words. I'm a wily old fox. It gives you a bit more latitude, okay? And so in other words, I only want to see the word count of the reflective report part. Now, even though there's a third part here, exclude those. Do you know how to do this in Word? Okay. You have your Word document. You're going to answer the first part, which are 3 reflective examples. Okay. And going through the cycle. And explicitly mention that you're using either Kolb or Gibbs cycle. You can do that once at the start and then not repeat it through each of the 3 events, whichever one you choose to use. And then the second part is that self-assessment. So if you highlight from the start of your writing down to the end of the reflective report, the end of the reflective section, that's the word count I'm suggesting, between 2,500 and 3,000 words. We ignore the rest. One of them is a PDF, which won't be counted. The other one will be a short document, a page or 2 on a short document. That would be counted. Ignore that. Just keep it to reflective. Are you with me? Do you know how to do that? Someone says, do I apply this to the first bullet point in the brief? Essentially, yes. Yeah, the reflective report part. Only that part is the word count. Kate and Billy have hand up. Fire away.
That's my hand, thank you. So initially when I read that, the thing that jumped out at me was a situation at work where I had been shouted at, and that happened repeatedly and my responses were different. But then I started thinking, this is a leadership and management course. And in that situation, I wasn't a leader. So would I be better off to pick something that's more relevant to leadership, or is it okay to go with the thing that jumped out at me?
I think I would my first reaction would be to say, think from a leadership perspective. Okay, that would be my first reaction. However, they're valuable experiences, and how you handle them as a follower. You could look at it from that perspective and then say, you know, my future leadership self
Yeah.
would behave this way based on what I've learned. So you're getting quite deep, but it works quite effectively because you're showing the two perspectives from yourself.
Lovely. Okay. Thank you. And then the last little bit is, you want this referenced, yeah? But only the reflective report part.
The only reference you really would have in there would be the course notes and yeah, if you're using references, well and good, yeah, and using a Harvard system, that's the one that I generally subscribe to. It's because usually they cover that with you in the writing skills.
There's a whole section on it, Mark.
Yeah, well then you're fine. Yeah, generally speaking, Harvard, I think it's the most flexible and it's easiest to follow, and it'll prep you. I'm not a stickler on references for these types of assignments, but I would say that it would be no harm to get into the practice of it, because you'll be doing it for your capstone project next semester. And in terms of, remember, I know, I'm looking at both sides of the fence here. You're looking for skills to enable you to, or I won't say looking for skills, you're wanting to augment your skills for future roles inside an organization. That's the fundamental drive behind this program. However, we have the academic side of stuff where we like to have stuff done this way, that way, and so on. This is the way we've always done it. Conservatism bias, but and the primary reason for that is most other lecturers use this Turnitin facility where you have to upload it to a particular area and it scans your document to say, have you copied stuff and plagiarized and all that sort of stuff. I'm of a different school of thought on that, because you can get quite anxious if you see large chunks of your stuff being, and the reality of it, as I said, the more stuff that gets uploaded there, the higher the probability of similarities occurring. And ultimately, we're all adults, and if you're going to copy and look for the quickest way out and so on and so forth, who loses out really is only yourself. If you're looking for the back door out into by copy and pasting and so on, because you're not learning stuff, So you can reference quite substantial material provided you reference it correctly. You're off the hook, and as long as you understand what you're referencing. So if you take a chunk of text out of someone's article or book and so on, it's how you critique that is what we look for. Not so much this is a great big reference and from certain that's a good book and all that. It's how you use it and make sense of it. Do you follow me? Because you'll find any amount of stuff written by the experts and all that sort of stuff. But again, that's their opinion. You have to make it your own, and you might agree with some of what I might say, and then say, but this isn't. My opinion is this, based on some of what Mark has said, and some of what Liam has said, and some of what Martin has said, and I pulled them all together, and this is my sense making it. And when you convey it or communicate it as a sense or an articulated viewpoint, then that's perfect. That's the whole point about literature reviews, for example. It's the biggest failing of students that I've seen over the years is that they become subservient to the books or the authorities or the experts and so on and so forth. And I say, no, you need to take ownership of it. You can take all these pieces of information, assimilate them, and develop a depth of knowledge and an opinion. And that's what you offer. That's the critical thinking. That's the critical commentary, and that's the critical analysis of a literature reviewer. That's what I try to drive my students and so on towards, that level of engagement. So yeah, I hope that answers question.
Yeah, it did. So we're looking for an in-depth understanding of ourselves and a critical reflection of ourselves. And if there's stuff that's in the documentation that's relevant, fair enough. But this one, it's not so
And it's not such a critical one for me.
perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Someone says that you want to take this from the leadership point of view, or would followership, and it depends on the context or the role that you're in. Okay. Ultimately, it works on both sides. Now, here's this is the add-on that I put onto it. Okay, so we covered the first part, the reflective, and I think we're all happy with that. And we've done that simple assessment, the PDF document, and so on. The third part, I've attached a template to it. I'll come back to it and I'll share the screen now in a minute. And basically it says, using the template, identify 2 aspects of leadership which you consider to be important for your professional development, which can develop you through action learning approach. So we haven't covered action learning in detail yet. I've talked about it and alluded to it and so on. But fundamentally, what I'm saying to you is look for a couple of actions or 2 examples, 2 aspects of leadership that you would do on the job, that you're not getting, and essentially that you're going through formal training courses and so on, something that you need to improve about yourself from all the data you've gathered through the reflective practice, through the psychometric tests and so on. And again, you could use some of the material that you used in your reflective report when you get to that point. What will I do next and how will I do this next? Remember I was talking about taking instance A, the first occurrence of it, the second occurrence of it, and then how are you going to, if this comes up in the future, this is how I plan to go about it. That you could take 2 examples of the 3 experiments or the 3 instances, A, B, and C. You can pick 2 of those and take 2 of those elements and slot it into this final part of the assessment and say, through an action learning, I can do this. Or you might have done it. You could say, I've tried this. You could take the iteration between in instance A, the first time you did it, and the second time you did it. And you could take those 2 and say that you applied through an action learning by doing, and it worked. Then I've now set up my thought process that the next time I take action on this, this is how I go about it. So you can use the material. That's why I shouldn't be saying this on camera, but it took me a few hours yesterday to come at this at the right angle without creating a mountain of extra work for yourselves. And I said, how can we be more efficient? And trust me, I thought for a long time and walked away. So how could I build in this to keep tick all the boxes and at the same time be as efficient and economical for yourselves? Because I know if you went in and looked at this this morning without any explanation, it probably would have put the heart crossways in you. What in the name of God, how do I go about this, and so on and so forth. And that's how you go about it, how I've just explained it there, for example. So it's basically you can use a past event that you tried out. So essentially the action learning, because you're flying slightly in the unknown here in the clouds, because we haven't covered it. It's on next week. So you could leave that part of the assignment and okay, let me share the screen. As I said here in leadership, and the materials you're using, the following resources will assist you in this element of the assessment. And if you go down here, and here's, okay, would have to be in landscape. You got so I'm going to change this. I had slightly different wording here. It was to be an effective leader, an effective follower. I'll just slightly modify that, but that's all I had here by way of examples. Just let me expand the screen here so as you can see it. more effectively, and I need to do something down here so as I can get all of it onto the screen. That's it, yeah. So that's, and I've said three, I've left 3 boxes in there, so it's only two examples of what I expect, and that would constitute, for all intents and purposes, what might be considered to be a professional development plan. Only 2 instances, because you can't do a professional development plan on everything. You'll be there from Monday to Sundays, trying to do something. So I'm only looking at using 2 examples of where you can apply or will apply the learning as part of your professional development. So you can borrow what you've been doing and through your reflective, and indeed some of the stuff that you might have been doing with Dave. You could take some of those examples there in that Dave would have covered with you, if you follow me. I'm just trying to follow chat here at the same time. Do the events need to be similar? No, they don't. It would make it easier for you to have 3 distinct instances, 3 distinct events to reflect on. 2 could be positive, 1 could be negative, or whatever the case may be. I would certainly say, have 1 of each at least, apologies if this is the has the date moved given the extra content? I suppose the obvious question is, would you like me to move the date? Hang on a second here now till I stop sharing the screen. And someone's already asking about feedback from the previous assignments. The generic feedback is generally speaking, I'm happy with them. As for individual marks, I don't have them done. There's been no disasters, no fails. You'll be delighted to know. I pretty much have everyone's stuff in. Again, might have been 1 or 2 instances where there was a little bit of too much reflection, and I didn't want a reflection, but that's not going to hurt you. But some people might have done a little bit extra more than than required. It was just to give your immediate thoughts rather than to purely reflect on the things, because you wouldn't have had the reflective practice material to do it justice as such. But generally speaking, no. There was a few people were kind of shocked with their results, with their analysis, but that's fine. I mean, that was the whole point of it. So no disasters. You can let's just say you can tick those boxes off. Is that sufficient feedback? As I said, there's no disasters. That's the important point.
I suppose, Mark, just to know kind of where we're going, will we be getting those marks before the next one? And I think, well, I know that I would like a little bit more time for this one now.
Okay. I won't create a poll, but and I don't want to tie into your, well, you've no exams. That's the upside of it. If I were to if I add another week, it's going to bring you into Dave's assignment. His is due on the 13th as well, I think, isn't it, or something like that, in December, the following week.
Greece is about due on the 17th.
There's two due on the 13th. I have
17th.
17th.
It's they're due the week of the 13th, but it's actually the 17th is the deadline.
Okay. So that's it's almost 2 weeks after my one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Give or take. And mine is it on Monday is the 6th, isn't it? Just let me open up a calendar here to reset that.
Monday is the 6th.
Come on, calendar. Jeez, we're in November. We were told yesterday we're going back online the week after next, daytime. It's not a problem, but let me see, where am I? So Monday the 6th. Um,
I'm okay with that date.
I wouldn't say that too loudly.
Oh, I thought it was, sorry, I thought it was on mute. Sorry about that.
There are people there. I can see their hands go up.
We vote with Catherine.
Let me. I can move it out a week. You know,
Sure. Yeah, like if you move it a week, sure, it doesn't stop people who are ready submitting it early anyway.
no, it doesn't.
Anyway, so
I'll have it open from beginning of December,
Yeah,
well, give or
yeah.
take. But I certainly can leave it open until. But if you want to take the extra time and go back over it or make some modifications and so on, how does that go with everyone? If you can give me a thumbs up, I can see something on screen. Yeah, all those with cameras give me the majority of people give me. Yeah, they're all up with everyone's thumbs up. So yeah, wow, jeez, the lights are flashing here. This is the most active I've seen this screen or of any class. Yeah.
Mark, can I just ask a really quick question there? Just something you said there about 15-20 minutes ago kind of made my heart skip a beat there. So just in relation to our original, look, I know you made changes to the detail of the assignment, but the original draft of that, was I right in assuming that required an analysis of all three instances that you would have picked using either the Gibbs or the Kolb method? The reason I ask is because I have the majority of that work done. It's just when you said there about 15 or 20 minutes, 20 minutes ago that you only wanted us to do that with one of the instances.
No, you know, you're on the right tracks. I was just saying, when you're referring to Gibbs cycle and so on and so forth, just do it once.
Okay, all right. So
Oh God, no, just to economize on words, it's it's just technique, to.
Okay, so I'm right in doing the Gibbs or the Kolb analysis on all three instances.
Absolutely. That's it. Yeah,
that's perfect. That's great. All right.
And as I
Thank God for
said,
that.
and the key to it then is what you would have learned from that. And so always keep the phrase in the back of your mind. What did I do previously, and how can I improve on the way I did what I did previously, and how did I feel about all of this at the time? That's I might qualify that statement to bring in the emotion, but the important thing about it is that the emotions can change from event to event, and as long as we're aware of that and we speak about it. Now there are examples in your from it's definitely from topic 8 or week 8 part 1, reflective practice part 1. You'll see in there writing a reflective report. You'll get some the PDF documents. You get some examples inside there, turning reflection into action. And down at the very bottom of your Moodle page, you even have Jenny Moon's book. I got a copy of that in PDF, and it's reflective practice and experiential learning. Now, you might just want to scan through some bits of that, and where she talks about, remember in the video that I showed you, she was talking about depth of knowledge and depth of reflection and so on, and what makes makes you stand out as a leader and a professional, and all of this, you see, the real beauty of all of this is it's in your careers, it will most definitely help. You'll move in directions that you want to move, and you can start to influence that far more positively, and that's really what it comes down to. I did talk about earlier on in the video about the, pay particular attention to it when we're talking about in the area of the biases. I know some people are taking notes on this. Okie dokie, folks. I hope that was of help to you so far. And
that's great. Thank you.
Not all, you're more than welcome, folks. And listen, have a good afternoon and enjoy the match when Dave lets you out for it. And I'll see you Monday night then. Thanks. And of course, this isn't the end of it. We can also go back and, if there's specific areas that are of value to the general cohort, we can raise them again in relation to the assignment. Alrighty, folks.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Cheers.
Okay, take it easy, folks. We'll see you Monday night. God bless. Bye bye.